Hi, everybody. In this project, you're going to be using Logic Pro to create some new music. You're going to download a loop that I provide you. You're going to bring it into Logic and set it to repeat. You're going to create some new software instrument tracks. And then you're just going to come up with some new musical ideas that fit over that loop. You're going to create a new piece of music. When you're done, you'll bounce it all out to an MP3 file and you'll submit that to Canvas. The goal on this first project is just to sort of get you comfortable with the process of creating musical ideas in Logic, how to record things onto a MIDI keyboard and apply them to different sounds, and how to edit them after the fact, and then ultimately how to send that file on to someone else so they can listen to it. We're going to cover this in 3 videos. In this first video, I'm going to give you just a basic orientation to how Logic works, how things like tracks and regions function, how to use the region parameter box to control things like looping or quantization. In the second video, I'm going to walk you through the project, just step by step, how to do each thing that the project is asking for. And then in the final third video, I'll cover how to bounce your project out to an MP3 file, and then how to upload that MP3 file to Canvas so you can submit the project. If you're ready, I'm assuming that you've already downloaded and installed Logic, that you've already got the additional content downloaded, and that you've already gone through the process of getting the additional tools authorized and the key commands plugged in. So I'm assuming you've done all the prep work and you're ready to jump in and get started with Logic. Let's go. So the first thing I'm going to do is launch Logic. I'm going to create a new file. And it's going to ask me what sort of track I want to place in this new file. The 2 main tracks we're going to use all semester long are the software instrument track and the audio track. The big difference between these 2 types of tracks is that an audio track is designed to record and play back acoustic audio material, things that you might record through a microphone into an audio interface and out. On the other hand, a software instrument track is designed to let us send MIDI information in through a MIDI controller, and then Logic will take that MIDI information and it will create sounds based on some pre-designed software instruments that are loaded up into the software. So if what we want to send in is MIDI data, we'll use a software instrument track. If what we want to do is record audio through a microphone, we'll choose an audio track. So I'm going to go ahead and create a software instrument track. And this is going to bring me into the main window in Logic. This is where you'll spend a lot of your time in this project and in most projects. This is where we enter data in, we can record information. It's also where we can do some of our basic editing of the information. So to start with, I've created a software instrument track, which means I have a MIDI keyboard plugged in, and I'm going to be able to pull up sounds over here from the library that will turn my MIDI data into whatever kind of sound I want to hear. So let's get Steinway grand piano going up here. And it's working. I'm playing it on my MIDI keyboard. The software is turning the notes that I send into the software into different sounds. I can easily switch this up to something else. Like let's go to a big classic pulse wave synth or classic pad here. This area of the screen over here is called the library. And if you're not seeing it right away, this icon right up here will show or hide the library for you. And when it's open, it'll show us a bunch of preset sounds that are built into Logic. I'm going to go in here to orchestral, woodwinds, and let's grab, yeah, why not? Let's grab a bassoon solo. It's fun to kind of experiment with the different sounds that are built into Logic. You'll find a lot of things, both some weird things and some creative things, but also you'll find most of the acoustic instruments that you're used to working with if you want to write something that's more geared toward traditional instrumental ensembles. Once I've created a track, once I've selected a sound, I'm going to begin recording my MIDI data into Logic. I'm going to hit record. It'll give me 4 clicks, and then I'm just going to play a simple part in. So here's what just happened. This keyboard sitting in front of me doesn't have any sounds built into it. Instead, it's what's called a MIDI controller. And its job is to send short little messages that tell the system what note I pressed, how hard I pressed it, and then when I let it go. So this isn't sending the sound of a piano into Logic. It's just sending Logic a message that says C was played. And here's how hard it was hit, and here's when it was released. Logic's going to take that information and it's going to package it together in what's called a region. Regions are really common in linear editors like Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase, or even video editors like Final Cut Pro. A region is just a container, a box, that has some other information inside of it. It lets us grab and edit and manipulate and move the whole block of information, or it lets us open the region and edit the information that's inside of it, in this case, the MIDI data. Once we've recorded a region that has some MIDI data inside of it, we can take that region and we can do things like we can drag it around, back and forth. Or if we want to, we can open the region and we can take a look at the data that's inside of it and edit it with a little more precision. If I double click on the region, it'll open a new editor window down here. And I can see that data laid out in a piano roll. Or if I want to, I can see it in a format that might be a little more familiar to me. I can see it laid out in score notation. And in either of these editors, I can start grabbing the data and moving it around. So, for example, let's change this D up to a G. Or if I want to control things like the beginning, middle, or end of a note, I can come here and let's extend this C out so it takes all the way up to bar 2. And then let's take this note and let's start it earlier. These editors, the piano roll and the score, are our primary place where we can make modifications to MIDI data that we've already played into the software. There's a few other things we should know about here in the main window in Logic. The first we're already familiar with, it's the library over here. And that lets us look at all of the preset sounds that are built into Logic. The preset sounds, there's two things going on with a preset. The first is we're selecting a sound source, in this case, a piano sound source. And then we're adding some additional plugins after the fact that modify the sound. These might be things like delays or distortion or reverb. When we choose a preset out of the library, it's already made decisions for us about what kind of plugins we want to have on it and what kind of sound source we want to have. But we can modify all those after the fact by clicking in here into the channel strip inspector. This shows us everything that's going on with the sound that's being produced here. If we want to make modifications to the region itself, we can do that up here in what's called the region parameter box. This lets us control things like whether we want to loop or not, whether we want to transpose the notes or not, or if we want to quantize the notes, which is a way of modifying the timing on the notes as a whole. I'm going to quantize this to eighth notes and watch what happens to the note data here in the piano roll. It's going to snap everything into line. I can undo that. Everything is non-destructive here. But the channel strip inspector and the region parameter box are where we'll spend most of our time modifying the big picture of the sound. And we'll use the piano roll and we'll use the score editor to make changes to individual notes to correct things like timing or wrong notes we might have hit along the way. So that should be a basic overview on how to get started in Logic, the basics of how the main window functions, and then how we can use things like the piano roll and the score editor and quantization to clean up our musical ideas after we've played them in. At this point, you should be ready to move on to the second video, which will walk you through this actual project.